Okay, so this is the continuation, part number 2. So let's continue with the parasitism. Okay, parasitism, one organism benefits and the other is harm. So meaning the sign of this is positive and negative. Okay? So your pathogens, all of your pathogenic microorganisms actually are included under your parasitism relationship. Now, okay, under certain circumstances, relationships between organisms can change. Your normal microbiota might become opportunistic pathogens. Okay, what are opportunistic pathogens? They are organisms that do not ordinarily cause disease in their natural habitat. Okay, if they are present class, kung nasa location sila in their natural habitat, they will not be pathogenic. But in cases of broken skin, damaged mucous membranes, or weakened hosts, this same organism can cause serious disease. So, hindi naman basta-basta nagiging opportunistic yung normal microbiota. Okay? There must be an imbalance happening in the body. Okay? Dapat nagkaroon ng weakened immunity muna. Okay? Naging immunocompromised yung host so that the balance between its normal microbiota was disrupted. This event turns your normal microbiota into opportunistic pathogen. So, parang ano lang, no? Nagiintay lang sila na magkaroon ng changes in the body of the host in order for them to attack. Okay? Most AIDS patients die of infections caused by opportunistic pathogens that take advantage of the weakened immune system. So, yung mga AIDS patient natin, your AIDS is a type of sexually transmitted disease. Okay? It is a result of STD. Most of the AIDS patients, they don't die because of AIDS itself, okay? Karamihan ng mga AIDS patient natin namamatay because of the extreme infections that they experience when they are immunocompromised. Since mahina yung immune system nila, the immune system of the body will not be able to protect the body from opportunistic pathogens and also from foreign pathogens. So, dalawa na yung umaatake sa katawan. That's why they die maybe because of tuberculosis. Okay, if na-encounter nila ang such type of viruses or bacteria, madali silang may invade kasi nga wala nang malakas na immune system. Okay? So, one example of your your parasitism relationship is hosts and ticks. So, this one. Your ticks are found in different types of domesticated animals. Sometimes, dumidikit rin ito sa humans when there is an extreme case. Okay? If hindi na control yung growth or multiplication of the ticks. So, pwedeng pati ibang types ng host, didikitan na nila, such as humans. Okay? So, in some situations, microbes cooperate with each other in causing diseases. Okay? Merong times na parang nag-uusap yung microbes inside the body. Hey, do you want to make a partnership with me? Gusto mo bang mag-combine tayo ng strength in order to produce a much stronger effect on the host of the body? So, ginagawa nila yan. And you call that the teamwork between two types of pathogenic microorganisms is synergism. Okay? Synergism, working together between two microorganisms. Okay? Your synergism means that the effect of two microbes together is greater than the effects of either acting alone. Mas malakas pag sama-sama. For example, cells infected with Mycoplasma bacteria seem to be more susceptible to AIDS. So, yung mga taong meron ng infection done by Mycoplasma bacteria, mas madali silang madapuan ng AIDS. Okay? So, yan yung one example natin ng synergism. Okay? Working together. Next, let's go with Okay, so nandito na tayo sa classifying. We are trying to classify the different types of infectious diseases. When you say infectious diseases, these are diseases caused by pathogenic microorganisms. Okay, always remember that. Diseases that are caused by pathogenic microorganisms. So we have three terms here. Number one, you have the symptoms. So, symptoms, changes not apparent to an observer. So, meaning, yung symptoms natin, class, these are actually changes in body function, no, that such as, for example, pain or malaise. When you say malaise, feeling of discomfort, okay, you are not comfortable. So, anong spelling ng malaise? M-A-L-A-I-S-E, malaise, and pain, okay? So, kapag sinabi mong symptoms, ito yung more on feelings of the patient. Ano yung nararamdaman ng patient? For example, headache, stomach cramps, pwede ring fatigue, di ba? From overwork or stress, back pain. So, yan yung mga nararamdaman ng patient that is not visible or you will not be able to observe it through using your eyes. Okay? You will not be able to measure the symptoms. Hindi siya ma-observe ng physician. For example, pumunta ka sa doktor. Hindi siya makikita ng doktor by just observing the physical appearance of the patient. So, kailangan tanungin pa ng doktor. Ito yung mga tinatanong niya, anong nararamdaman mo? Masakit ba ang ulo mo? Do you feel nausea? Okay? Do you have a headache? So, yan na mga example natin ng symptoms. Okay? On the other hand, signs, kabaliktaran niya, changes that can be observed or measured. Ito na yung mga objective. These are the objective changes that a physician can observe and actually measure. For example natin yan, like swelling, you have the fever. Ang fever, pwede mo siyang ma-measure, diba? Through using or measuring the temperature of the body. Pwede ring paralysis. So, yan yung mga example ng signs natin. Yung nakikita. Okay? Now, when you say syndrome, class, this is the combination of the symptoms and signs that is accompanying a particular disease. And each type of disease will have a couple of pairing of signs and symptoms na makikita lang sa certain disease na yon. So, specific itong syndrome natin. So, take a look at this. Okay? So, ito, diba? This is a sign. Discoloration of the skin, this one, formation of rashes, yan, signs yan. Kasi na-observe ng physician. Discoloration of the sclera of the eye, diba? Swelling for mumps. Okay? So, yan ang signs natin. You can observe them. Now, we have here the different classifications of your infectious diseases. And number one, so let's take number one, based on how the disease spread. So, paano siya kumakalat? Okay? From one host to another. So, number one, you have the communicable disease. When you say communicable disease, it can spread from one host to another, either directly or indirectly. So, ano yung mga example natin ng mga disease na napapasa from one host to another? Number one, you have chickenpox. So, pwede yan. Number two, you have typhoid fever. Pwede yan. And then, you can also have tuberculosis. So, these types, HIV, pwede rin. So, these types of diseases can be, they are communicable. Okay? Pwede mong mapasa ito sa ibang host. On the other hand, we also have contagious disease. Okay? This is easily spread from one person to another. So, when you say contagious disease, class, specific lang, this is just specific for humans. From person to person. Okay? Meaning, kapag contagious yung disease, pwede mong mahawa ang ibang tao. Okay? Dito kasi sa communicable disease, from one host to another. So, yung host, pwede maging animals, pwede maging ibang other types of organisms, while in contagious disease, this is specific for only persons or humans. Letter C, non-communicable disease. This is not spread from one host to another. So, itong types ng disease na ito, hindi siya contagious, hindi rin siya nalilipat. Okay? So, it will just stay on the infected host and it will not spread to others. So, ano yung mga examples natin ng contagious disease? Sa contagious muna. Example niyan is chickenpox and measles. Okay? Please take note. Sa non-communicable disease naman, example natin dyan is your Clostridium tetani. Your Clostridium tetani causes tetanus. And yung tetanus, hindi mo siya napapasa into other persons. Okay? It is non-communicable. Now, ano ba yung basehan para maging isang non-communicable disease? Okay? So, your non-communicable disease can be either caused by microorganisms that normally inhabit the body and only occasionally produce disease. So, pwedeng nakuha mo siya hindi galing sa ibang host. So, sa'yo na talaga nang galing yung microorganism. Nasa katawan mo na. And then later on, nag-cause siya ng disease. Pwedeng opportunistic pathogens ito. On the other hand, you can also state that non-communicable disease is caused by microorganisms that reside outside, galing sa labas, of the body and produce disease only when introduced into the body. So, ganun siya. Hindi siya nanggaling sa ibang host. Pwedeng originally nasa katawan mo na yung pathogenic agent or pwede ring nanggaling siya sa environment. Nakuha mo siya galing sa environment pero hindi galing sa ibang host. Kuha? So, I hope you're taking down notes. Okay, let's go to number 2. Classification based on occurrence of the disease. So, you have 4. Letter A, sporadic disease occurs only occasionally. So, one example natin ng sporadic disease is your typhoid fever. Hindi siya always, it is very rare, okay? Now, letter B, you have endemic disease, always present in a particular population. So, yung disease na ito, makikita mo lang siya sa isang environment or isang area. Okay? Endemic. Sa isang city, for example, nandoon lang yung disease. Hindi siya lumalabas. Letter C, epidemic disease. Many people come down with the disease within a short period of time. So, maraming nahahawa at mabilisan yung pagkahawa nila. That is epidemic. Inside one, lang. For example, inside the country lang. Okay? Kapag pumunta na siya sa ibang parts ng mundo, that is what you call pandemic disease. Worldwide epidemic. Kumalat na siya sa ibang location. Okay? So, anong example ng ng endemic disease natin? So, sa endemic disease ang example natin, common cold. Sa epidemic disease, example natin dyan is influenza. And then, for pandemic disease, so, the most common example, COVID-19. Okay? So, we have 2 terms here, incidence of a disease and prevalence of a disease. Anong pinakaiba ng dalawa? You have incidence, the fraction of a population that contracts the disease in a particular time period. So, meaning, when you say incidence of a disease, this is the rate, okay, of how many people might probably be infected with the pathogen in a particular time. Okay? Rate of, this is the rate at which new cases occur in a population during a specific period of time. Kuha? So, iilang tao yung possible na mahawaan ng sakit sa ganitong time. Okay? Parang ganun yung sa incidence of a disease. On the other hand, when you say prevalence of a disease, the fraction of a population having the disease at a specified time. So, meaning, ito na yung total, when you say prevalence of a disease, this is the total number of cases of diseases existing in a population. So, wala na yung word na probable. Okay? dito mo na binibilang yung number ng cases that is existing in the certain period of time inside a population. Bilangin mo na kung you count how many positive cases ang nandoon sa population mo. Okay? So, that is the difference between your incidence and prevalence. Your prevalence is the actual number of cases inside a population, while your incidence is the rate of the probable or the rate of, they call this, new cases that will occur pa in a short period of time. Okay. So, kumbaga pa, ang incidence of a disease concerned with the future events, while ang prevalence of a disease is concerned in the present, present time. Next. Third classification is based on severity or duration of a disease. So, number 1, you have acute disease. So, this develops rapidly and lasts only a short period of time. So, hindi siya ganun, hindi siya kumbaga it only lasts for a few days or few months, but it will eventually stop. Okay? So, one example natin dyan is influenza. Pero, dito sa acute disease, kahit na maikli lang yung time niya na present siya, you will have extreme symptoms and signs. Okay? Pangmalakasan itong acute disease. On the other hand, when you say chronic disease, this develops more slowly and may continue to recur for long periods. Okay? So, meaning, hindi ganun kabilis ang development nitong chronic disease. Dahan-dahan siya and it takes a very long time before it will reach the climax. Okay? So, one example nito is your cancer. Pwedeng mahina ang development and then mawawala and then later on, magugulat ka na lang, bumalik na yung cancer. So, chronic disease. Letter C, subacute disease. So, this is an intermediate between your acute and chronic. And then, you also have the latent disease in which a causative agent enters the body but remains dormant for some period of time. Later, the agent becomes active and cause symptoms. So, sa latent disease, late ang reaction ng body. Kasi, the causative agent will still be inactive inside the body for a short period of time and then later on, magiging active na siya and will cause the disease. Okay. So, ano ang kinalaman ng immunity ng population sa pag-spread ng disease? Okay? When you say immunity, the immunity of a population, it can actually determine the rate at which a disease spreads and the number of individuals involved. Okay? So, nagmamatter yung rate of speed, okay, of the spreading of a disease. It matters when it comes to the immunity of the population. Okay? So, how do we achieve the immunity of a population? By having what? Vaccinations. Okay? So, your vaccine can produce a large number of immune persons in a population. So, making it unlikely that even susceptible persons will come in contact with the disease-causing agent. When many immune people are present in the community, this is called herd immunity. The fewer sick people there are, the less likely the disease will spread to susceptible people. So, diba sabi niya, the immunity of the population will determine the rate of the spreading of the disease. Kapag mas maraming immune ang present in a population, mas hihina, okay, as the number of immune persons increase in a population, the spreading of the disease decreases. Okay, humihina yung pag-spread ng disease. Why? Because the vaccinated or the immune people will serve as a barrier nagsiserve siya as a barrier so that hindi na mag-spread ang disease from one infected person to another. So, this is what we are hoping to achieve in our country, no? Herd immunity. Okay? Nangyayari lang ang herd immunity if more than or at least 80% of the population will be vaccinated. Okay? So, parang ganito yung nangyayari, class. Oh. Look at this one. The pink one is an infected person. So, meaning, she is carrying the causative or the pathogenic microorganism. For example, the virus. Now, if the population achieved herd immunity, meaning mas marami na ang vaccinated, mas marami na rin ang immune to the disease. So, nakita nyo, if the infected person is surrounded by people who are immune, it will the virus, okay, or the pathogen will not be spread to the not immune person, okay? So hindi mo na siya malipat doon sa mga hindi pa vaccinated kasi nga nag-serve na as a barrier yung mga immune na individuals. Okay? So they serve as a barrier in spreading the disease to other non-vaccinated individuals. So yan sana yung dapat ma-achieve during this pandemic. But since in our country we are lacking vaccinations, wala pang proper number ng vaccine available to the public, then maybe matagal-tagal pa nating ma-achieve yung herd immunity. Okay? So, siguro mga ilang years pa yan. 1 year or 2 years, I don't know. Depending on the performance of the government in spreading the vaccine. Okay? And depending on the citizens themselves, depending on the people in our country, kung gusto nilang magpa-vaccine or hindi. Okay? So, may factor din yung beliefs ng mga tao for achieving the herd immunity. If mas marami sa population ng Philippines ang ayaw magpa-vaccine, then we will never achieve herd immunity. Okay? That's why medical staffs are raising the awareness, no, that vaccine is not harmful, rather it is helpful to the ones contracting the COVID-19 virus. Okay? Next. Okay, so the fourth classification is basing on the extent of host involvement. Gaano ka-involve yung ating host sa disease, gaano kalakas yung epekto ng disease sa host. Number 1, local infection. This is limited to the relatively small area of the body. Meaning, small area of the body lang ang affected, hindi ang buong katawan. Okay? On the other hand, systemic or generalized infection, microbes or their products are spread throughout the body by blood or lymph. So, since the circulatory system is circulating throughout the body, if present sa circulatory system mo yung causative agent or the pathogen, meaning buong katawan mo is affected. Okay? Next, focal infection. Agents of infection enter the blood or the lymphatic vessel and spread to other specific parts of the body where they remain confined. In this type of infection naman, class, merong target na area sa katawan mo yung pathogen. So, doon lang siya nagtathrive kung saan niya gustong or kung saan yung focal point niya. Okay? Or the destination or of your pathogenic agent. Next, bacteremia, presence of bacteria in the blood. I think understandable naman yan. Septicemia or sepsis, the bacteria are not only present in the blood but are multiplying there. So, kapag nagkaroon na ng multiplication or growth of bacteria in your blood, that is the time you will call it as septicemia. Okay? Next. Toxemia, presence of toxins in the blood. Viremia, presence of viruses in the blood. Primary infection, okay, this one. Acute infection causing the initial illness. So, ito yung first wave of the disease or infection. Okay, ito yung pinakaunang exposure ng body towards the pathogen. Okay, primary infection. We also have secondary infection caused by an opportunistic pathogen after the primary infection has weakened the defenses of the body. Now, usually, class, your secondary infection is much more dangerous than the primary infection. Kasi nga, this one, or in this state, weakened na yung immune system ng individual. So, mas madali na siyang, the individual is more susceptible to the secondary wave of pathogens, especially the opportunistic pathogen. So, mahina na yung immune system. Kaya, hindi na masyadong nakakalaban pagdating ng secondary infection. So, usually, the goal is to prevent secondary infection para hindi na maging mas malala yung case. Okay? We also have subclinical infection. No noticeable illness but carrying the microbe. Okay. So, in this one, ito yung case ng mga asymptomatic. Okay? Kasi wala kang nakikita na illness dito sa subclinical infection. Okay? So, mas madali itong nas-spread to others. Okay, next. So, these are the sequence of events in the pattern of a disease. Okay? Number 1. So, syempre, in order for a disease to occur, class, dapat meron kang reservoir or reservoir. Depending on how you will want to pronounce this. If British, reservoir, and then kapag American, reservoir. Okay? So, when you say reservoir, this is the source of a pathogen. Okay? Dito nang galing or nag-originate yung pathogens mo. So, sa reservoir, nanggagaling ang mga pathogen. There are different types of reservoir and we will tackle that later. Number 2, transmission of pathogen to susceptible host. So, ang nangyayari dito, your pathogen is transmitted from the reservoir papuntang susceptible host. When you say susceptible host, ito yung mga hosts that are, they call this, having a weaker immune system or basta. We will tackle later, after nito, kung paano ka maging isang susceptible host. Ano yung mga quality ng isang susceptible host. Okay? So, pwedeng through direct contact, pwede ring indirect contact, or through vectors ang transmission ng pathogen mo. Okay? Number 3, invasion of the host by the microbe. In this case, when you say invasion, ito na yung entrance ng pathogen. Okay? And your pathogen enters your host and then multiplies. Okay? Number 4, multiplication of the microbe inside the host. And then number 5, injury to the host. So, syempre, kapag meron tayong pathogen present, ang mangyayari, magkakaroon talaga ng injury. So, paano nangyayari yung injury to the host? Through the course of pathogenesis. Okay? Or the growth of or the development of the disease. So, during pathogenesis, nagkaka-injury, no, yung ating host. And the injury depends kung gaano, or the extent of the injury depends on the degree to which your host cells are damaged. So, kapag mas maraming host cells ang na-damage, syempre, mas malaki rin yung injury to the host. So, yan. The injury is produced during the pathogenesis period. Okay, ito na. Predisposing factor is one that makes the host more susceptible to the disease. So, ano ba yung mga predisposing factor para maging isang susceptible host ka? Okay? Number 1, you have the gender. So, parang kakaiba, no? Magmamatter pala yung makukuha mo na disease based on kung girl ka or if you're female or you're a male. For example natin dyan, if you're a female, you are most probably prone to UTI. Okay, than males. Mas prone ang mga female to UTI compared to males. On the other hand, mas prone naman ang males to pneumonia and meningitis compared sa mga females. So, your gender plays a role in the type of disease that you will get. Second, genetic background. So, one example natin dito is the sickle cell disease. Maalala nyo pa yun. So, diba, genetic background, if you have African or African American blood, mas susceptible ka sa sickle cell disease. So, that is just an example. Number 3, climate and weather. So, for example, in temperate regions class, mas dumadami the cases of respiratory diseases increases during winter. Kapag lumalamig na ang panahon, mas dumadami yung mga case ng respiratory diseases. Number 4, pwede rin inadequate nutrition. If malnourished ka, so mas weak yung immunity mo, no? So, you are more susceptible to diseases. Fatigue, the same, caused by stress or overwork. 6, your age. So, mas susceptible ang mga elderly natin to diseases compared to the younger ones. Number 7, environment. If you are in an environment where most pathogens are present, malamang you will contract the disease. Number 8, habits. The habit of the person and the lifestyle of a person will also matter. Number 10, pre-existing illness. If may illness ka na before, you are more susceptible to other types of diseases. Number 11, occupation. For example, ano ba yung trabaho mo? Are you exposed to certain pathogens in your work? So, it depends also in your occupation. Number 12, if you're undergoing chemotherapy. And number 13, if you are emotionally disturbed. Okay? So, that is for our second part. So, we will continue the third part okay, sige, continue na lang muna tayo. Mag-end tayo sa transmission of disease. Okay. Let's go to the development of the disease. So, you have 5 stages. Number 1, incubation period. So, at this time, this is the time between initial infection and first appearance of signs and symptoms. So, ito yung time in between na contract mo yung pathogen hanggang sa nag-show na siya ng signs or symptoms. So, this may vary depending on what? Microorganisms involved. Some microorganisms will become active from the start, no? From the time they enter the body, pwedeng mag-show agad ng signs and symptoms. Other types of microorganisms will remain dormant muna and then later on will become active. So, it depends on the type of pathogen that entered your body. Letter B, virulence of infecting microbes. So, gaano kalakas yung microbe na nakuha mo? How strong is it in causing diseases? Okay? Letter C, original number of invaders. If konti lang naman, expose ka sa maliit lang, no, na number of invaders, baka hindi ganun kalakas o hindi ganun kabilis yung incubation period. On the other hand, kapag marami, siguro mas mabilis. Okay, mas bibilis yung incubation period. Mag-show agad ng signs and symptoms. Letter D, resistance of the host. If walang resistance ang host to the pathogen, then expected na that the incubation period will be short. Okay? Number 2, prodromal period. So, when you say prodromal period, class, this is the short period of time following your incubation. And included dito sa prodromal period ang early mild symptoms. So, hindi pa ganun ka-extreme yung symptoms dito sa prodromal period. Siguro mga general aches and malaise lang. Number 3. So, sa number 3, ayun na. you are now having the disease, or you are having now the illness caused by the disease. In the illness period, patients show signs and symptoms of the disease. So, dito nalalabas yung signs, extreme signs and symptoms. Usually, the resistance of the host overcomes the pathogen and recovery begins. So, sa illness period class, ito siya yung pinaka-acute na version ng disease, 'di ba? Meron tayong chronic disease, meron tayong acute. Dito sa illness, ito siya ay acute, on the level of acute. Bakit? Hindi siya ganun katagal, pero very extreme yung mga symptoms na, kumbaga pa full-blown na yung symptoms and signs na nararamdaman ng patient kapag nasa illness period na. For example, the patient will experience fever, pwede ring chilling, no? Pwede ring muscle pain or gastrointestinal tract disturbance. So, stomach ache. Okay, another term natin for muscle pain, pwede ring, you can call it as myalgia. M-Y-A-L-G-I-A. Myalgia. Okay, another term for muscle pain. Now, during the illness period class, sa point na ito, the WBC will increase or decrease depending if natatalo niya yung pathogen or the WBC is losing the battle. Okay? And during your illness period, when the disease is not successfully overcome or treated, the patient might die. Okay? Pag hindi nalampasan yung illness period, ang patient natin namamatay due to unsuccessful treatment of the disease. Pero kapag successfully na na-treat yung disease, then the patient will now go to the period of decline. So dito, the patient improves and signs and symptoms taper off or subsides. Nag-subside na yung mga signs and symptoms natin. And on the convalescence, so, ang nangyari dito, naka-recover na yung patient. Okay? The patient is now well and back to its original state of health. Now, throughout the 5 periods of the development of the disease, the patient can spread the infection to other people. So, contagious siya in all levels. Yung 1 to 5 natin. Next. So let's go to the spread of infection. Many people carry pathogens and transmit them to others directly or indirectly. Okay. So I just had a water break class. Okay. Back to the topic. So, ano ba yung different types ng reservoir natin or reservoir? So, pinakauna dyan is the human reservoirs. Many people carry pathogens and transmit them to others directly or indirectly. So, as a person which is infected, pwede mong mapasa sa iba pang tao yung disease or infection. These people may have signs and symptoms of the disease, or they may be in period without signs and symptoms, either before or after the disease develops. Others may be carriers without ever developing signs or symptoms of the disease. So, ang tawag mo doon sa mga tao na infected pero walang signs and symptoms na pinapakita is asymptomatic carriers. So, sila yung type ng human reservoir that are the most dangerous kasi nga, they are not showing signs. So, you will not know if infected siya. So, hindi niya alam mismo na infected siya. So, pupunta pa siya sa mga lugar na may ibang tao, not knowing that he or she is unintentionally spreading the disease. Okay? Number 2, animal reservoir or reservoirs. So, in your animal reservoirs, dito yung zoonosis. Do you remember the zoonosis? So, di ba kapag zoonosis, a disease coming from a wild or domestic animal can be transferred to humans. Example natin dyan is the rabies. Okay? So, zoonosis yan. Now, zoonoses are primarily diseases of animals but can be transmitted to humans. About 150 zoonoses have been identified, and these diseases spread to humans in various ways. Number one, direct contact with the infected animal. If you touch the animal that is infected, pwede yun. Letter B, direct contact with the waste of the pets or cleaning the feces of your domesticated animals. Letter C, contamination of the food and water. Pwedeng na-contaminate yung iniinom ninyo na water with the feces of the animals. Letter D, contamination with or contact with contaminated hides, feathers, and fur. E, by consuming infected animal products. And F, by insect vectors. When an insect bites you, pwede yun siya. Just like your mosquito. Number 3, we have non-living reservoirs. So, the two main examples are the soil and water. Okay? So, maraming nabibiktima dito. Letter A, soil. So, you can have or you may find fungus organisms such as ringworm and systematic infections in the soil. Pwede ring may presence din ng Clostridium botulinum which causes botulism. Pwede ring Clostridium tetani that causes tetanus. On the other hand, when it comes to water, so you can find Vibrio cholerae, Salmonella typhi, and other gastrointestinal diseases. You can contract these types of diseases in the water. Usually, the water has become contaminated by the feces of humans or animals. If ang source of water ninyo is coming from the river and then yung ibang tao doon naliligo and then doon din kayo kumukuha ng drinking water, so you will not escape the spreading of the disease in that way. Okay, for example, this one. Okay, so clean drinking water is very important. Okay, let's go to transmission of the disease. Now, you have at least 3 types of transmission of your disease. Number 1, we have the contact transmission or the spread of an agent of disease by direct, indirect contact, or droplet. So, ano ba yung direct contact? So, you can also call this as person-to-person transmission with no intermediate object involved. So, meaning direct contact or touching between 2 persons. Okay? Direct contact. Now, respiratory diseases such as staphylococcal infections, hepatitis A, measles, smallpox, STDs including your AIDS, yan yung mga diseases na nakokontract ninyo through direct contact. Pwede ring rabies and anthrax, okay? Spread from animals to people. So, pwede ring direct contact with animals, okay? Basta as long as you are touching the infected host, that is direct contact. Now, in terms of humans, pwede nyo siyang makuha through touching, pwedeng through kissing, and through sexual intercourse. Okay? So, yan yun. Direct transmission of an agent by physical contact with its source and the susceptible host. Next. How about indirect contact? When you say indirect contact, meron kang involved na fomite, okay? Or a non-living object that is transmitting the disease. Galing sa reservoir hanggang sa susceptible host. So, fomite, examples ng fomite natin is your hanky, mga handkerchief ninyo, bedding or bedsheet, diapers, used diapers, eating and drinking utensils such as your fork and spoon and fork, money, 'di ba ang money natin kahit kanino lang napupunta. Thermometers and contaminated syringe. Okay? So, indirect contact, you're using an object in spreading the disease. Letter C, droplet. Discharge by coughing, sneezing, talking, and laughing. So, ang droplets natin, they are not considered as airborne diseases. Bakit? Ang travel nila into the air is less than 1 meter lang. When the droplets travel through air in less than 1 meter, they are not considered as airborne diseases. Okay? So, examples of this is your influenza, pneumonia, and whooping cough. Now, we have another name for the whooping cough. You can also call it as pertussis. 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 Okay? Okay. Now, sige, yan na lang muna siguro ang part 2. I will record now part 3. So, putulin ko muna dito, class. Okay?